Oké, ik ga beginnen. Ben je er klaar voor?
Ja.
Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this live event broadcasted from the Netherlands. We have participants both in the Pacific and the European Union in a variety of time zones. So enjoy your morning coffee or afternoon tea while we get this started in about 5 minutes. Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to this live event broadcasted from the Netherlands. We have participants from the Pacific and the European Union in a variety of time zones. So enjoy your morning coffee or afternoon tea while we get this started in a few minutes. Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to this live event broadcasted from the Netherlands. We will get this event started in a couple of minutes. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this live event broadcasted from the Netherlands. We will start in a few minutes. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this live event broadcasted from the Netherlands. We have participants from both the Pacific and the EU in a variety of time zones. So enjoy your morning coffee or afternoon tea while we get this started. Today, you will learn more about how you as a Japanese pharmaceutical company can benefit from the pharma ecosystem in the Netherlands and how to supply your pharmaceutical products to the European patients. We have 8 speakers lined up for you today. The first speaker is Mrs. Christa de Kemp-Everts, Managing Director at Dujat. She will introduce the agenda and the other speakers and will moderate today's event. Christa, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Stan, for those welcoming words. Also on behalf of me, a very welcome, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I would say a few welcoming words on behalf of Dujat. We are very happy that we can organize this important event together with Holland International Distribution Council. And I would like to say already a word of thanks to all our important speakers who shared their time and their expertise with you today. Dujat, for those of you who don't know about Dujat, Dujat is a non-profit organization aiming to strengthen the relation between Japan and the Netherlands. And I think it's fair to say that Dujat is a linking pin between the Japanese and Dutch community. Well, let me give you a short introduction on the agenda. We will start with welcome remarks of Mr. Remco Buurman. He is the CEO of Holland International Distribution Council. Next, we will have Ms. Faisa Mohamed, Project Manager NFRA and Sector Specialist Life Sciences and Health. Faisa assists businesses looking to invest in Holland and has a special focus on the life sciences and health segment. She will talk about the pharma ecosystem in the Netherlands. Then we will have Jasper Egedeen, Senior Manager Supply Chain Solutions at Holland International Distribution Council, the logistics specialist in the Invest in Holland network. Jasper helps Japanese companies on a daily basis with their logistics and supply chain setup in Europe by giving free advice and provide matchmaking services for logistics. He will explain what the Netherlands has to offer regarding the European pharma supply chain. The next speaker is Erik Willems, Business Development Director at O&M Movianto. O&M Movianto is a European healthcare solution partner focused on the pharmaceutical, biotech, medical device and diagnostic industries. He will explain how to set up your European pharma supply chain. The fourth speaker is Mr. Jens Vaassen, Managing Director at Baggerman Pharma Consult. Baggerman Pharma Consult provides consultancy services for the pharma industry. During his presentation, he will highlight some of the regulatory affairs that you need to take into account when setting up your European pharma supply chain. Then we will have Mr. Paul van den Berg. He is the partner at Freshfield Broekhuis Deringer. Freshfield Broekhuis Deringer is one of the largest and most prestigious multinational law firms in the world. During his presentation, Paul will tell us more about the regulatory framework for medical devices. The last speaker for today is Mr. Daniel Bollard, Business Manager, Shippers and Forwarders at the Port of Rotterdam. Daniel will talk about the capabilities of the Port of Rotterdam for pharma shipments shipped to Europe via the Port of Rotterdam. Finally, Mr. Gerard Michels, Consul General, the Kingdom of the Netherlands and Osaka, will round up the event with closing remarks. Unfortunately, due to some technical problems, he is not able to be live at this conference. So he asked me to speak out his closing remarks, and I will gladly do so. The recording and presentations will be made available to the attendees. Feel free to use the Q&A box to ask questions. After the presentations, we will have some time to ask those questions to the speakers. But first, Mr. Remco Buurman, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Krista, for these welcoming remarks. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And also on behalf of HIDC, a warm welcome to all the participants in Japan and the Netherlands at this webinar about pharma logistics. We have an excellent lineup with speakers who can give you an overview of the challenges and opportunities when developing your European pharma supply chain. It is a very special moment in time with the COVID-19 pandemic affecting business all over the world, also in the field of logistics. And the picture we get here in the Netherlands in our industry is very mixed. In some segments, logistic companies are actually doing quite well. For instance, in agro-food, e-commerce, life sciences, a lot of those companies are still doing quite well. And I even heard from some companies that they have some of the best months in years. But in other segments, business is really disrupted, like the automotive industry, furniture, fashion, etc. So the picture is mixed, and hopefully times will soon change and the economy will pick up again. But most important is for now is for all of us to stay healthy. But I also hope that your business continues in a very decent way. I would like to wish you all a very great webinar today, and I would like to thank you and have a lot of success. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Remco. We will now move on to the first presentation from Ms. Faiza Mohammed from the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency. Please, Faiza, go ahead by introducing yourself.
Thank you, Krista. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live webinar. My name is Faiza Mohammed, and I work for the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency, where I'm part of the Invest in Holland Life Science and Health team. During the next 15 minutes, I'll give you more background information on our life science and health community here in the Netherlands and explain what makes it so dynamic and appealing to foreign companies. Moving on to the first slide. The Netherlands is the European home of life science and health with a rich history in innovation. On this slide, you'll see a couple examples. One we are still very proud of is the invention of the microscope in the 1500s, and a more recent example, the Nobel Prize winner Ben Feringa. He invented molecular machines for oncology applications. To give you a good background on our information, I think it's good to understand what the government policy is for our sector. Globally, we are facing enormous challenges that can only be tackled by joining forces and being innovative. To stimulate this collaboration and innovation, our government has established a mission-driven top sector and innovation policy. This means that there are missions formulated to tackle these societal challenges, such as ensuring a greater and healthy life expectancy. And for example, a safe Netherlands to work in. There are many other missions that are formulated, but I can't get into it right now. All of these missions are ambitious goals that challenge entrepreneurs and scientists to develop pioneering solutions and to contribute to more innovation in health. As you can see on this slide, the central mission of the life science and health top sector is to work towards a healthy future. To achieve this goal, there are 4 sub-missions formulated, and as I will come to explain, the entire life science and health community is working together to achieve this goal. Collaboration is key for achieving the just mentioned mission. That's why in the Netherlands, we work in a quadruple helix approach. This means we have a close collaboration between academia, the industry, governments, and citizens. By using a citizen's perspective, innovation is fostered by researchers who conduct basic clinical and translational research, the industry for valorization, and the government provides funding opportunities for all the parties involved. On the next slide, you'll see that the Netherlands has 6 areas that we excel in. All of these areas are needed to achieve the aforementioned mission to make Netherlands to achieve the aforementioned mission. Due to the time, I can't get into all 6 matters right now, but if you have any questions about it, you can reach out to me. Moving on to the next slide, you'll see an overview of the many groundbreaking companies that have already chosen the Netherlands and are part of our life science and health ecosystem. All of these companies contribute in making the Netherlands a strong life science and health community. In the coming slides, I'll get into all these points, but on this slide, you'll see an overview of why most companies invest in the Netherlands and what makes our life science and health community so dynamic. To start with, the first one, connected on multiple levels. As you can see on the slide, the Netherlands is one connected life sciences and health cluster with multiple hubs having their own focus areas. Some say the Netherlands should be seen as one big city rather than a small country because it has the infrastructure of a city. It's the best connected country in the world. The country is connected in 3 ways, by infrastructure, collaboration and transparency, and in and outbound global connectivity. This connectedness in the sector has led to a high concentration of research output with over 3,100 life science and health companies. We have 420 biopharmaceutical companies, 600 to 700 medtech companies, 8 university medical centers, and 12 universities that are all engaged in the life science and health community. All these are all within 2.5-hour drive. The Netherlands is the gateway to Europe, which is one of the best seaports, airports of Europe, and with a high quality digital and roadway. Since one of the other presenters will get more into depth about this topic, I won't say anything more about this slide. Public-private partnerships. In the Netherlands, as science, industry, and governments all work together in public-private partnerships. A public-private partnership is a cooperative arrangement between 2 or more public and private companies. On average, there is spent 15 billion per year invested in R&D here in the Netherlands. This shows that the public-private partnership system for innovation is highly efficient and that it stimulates collaboration for innovation, and it receives worldwide acclaim. Our leading partner for these matching calls is Health Holland. Another reason what makes our life science and health community so strong is the research and education. Research in the Netherlands is state-of-the-art quality, partially because we have a world-class education system with all our 12 universities ranked in the top 300 universities worldwide. On top of that, we are a multilingual workforce. You won't have to be scared that the talent here doesn't speak English, as we are globally the #1 non-native speaker in English. Next to this, our work-life balance is very balanced out here, which might lead to the creativity needed for innovation in all of the life science and health topics. This creativity results in the Netherlands being among the top 10 patent applications worldwide. As many of you know, in 2019, the European Medicines Agency, EMA, moved from the United Kingdom to the Netherlands due to the uncertainties surrounding Brexit. The EMA is a centralized agency for marketing authorization of human and veterinary pharmaceutics, ensuring a safe, effective, and of high-quality medicines in the European Union. The arrival of the EMA underlines the trust of the European member states in the quality of life sciences in the Netherlands. On top of that, it employs 700 experts and makes use of a network of 50 regulatory authorities and 4,000 scientific experts. All of these are contributing to a state-of-the-art dynamic research society and a regulatory ecosystem in the Netherlands. To summarize, here you see an overview of our life science and health community and what makes it so dynamic. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm part of the Invest in Holland Life Science and Health team. I am one of the other 20 members of the team. It's a very extensive team. It's a collaborative team of the life science and health experts from the NFIA, the regional economic development agencies, and several large local partners. Our team, together with the foreign offices of NFIA, stands ready to help companies, big and small, at every stage of establishing or expanding operations everywhere. I think I went through the presentation quicker than I assumed before, but this shouldn't matter. If you have any questions before me, you can ask them later on during the Q&A or reach out to me by phone or email, and I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Faiza. Very interesting to learn more about the entire life sciences and health ecosystem in the Netherlands. This is what makes the Netherlands unique and attractive for Japanese life science and health companies. Well, we go on to the next speaker, Jasper Eggebeen from the Holland International Distribution Council will now explain what the Netherlands has to offer regarding the European pharma supply chain. Go ahead, Jasper.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you, Faiza, for explaining more about the healthcare ecosystem in the Netherlands. This is something that is certainly very valuable for foreign companies in the pharma sector coming to the Netherlands. As Krista mentioned, my name is Jasper Eggebeen. I'm Senior Manager Supply Chain at the Holland International Distribution Council. During my presentation today, I will be telling you more why the Netherlands is the key hub for your European pharmaceutical supply chain. And as this is a subject that I can talk for you for hours and hours on, I will stick to the highlights for today, as we only have 15 minutes. Over the past decade, the global life sciences and health sector has experienced healthy growth and is expected to continue growing. The European Union is an increasingly interesting market for companies in the pharma and medical devices sector. Apart from well-developed healthcare systems, Europe has a large consumer base, an aging population, and rising health expenditure. To scale up your European operations, the Netherlands is the perfect hub for a number of reasons. First, we have a central location within the European consumer market. We have an excellent connectivity to Europe and all other continents. We have a high share in global import and export flows, a world-class fiscal and business environment, a strong logistics base for pharma distribution. And in the following slides, I will go through each subject in more detail. But before we go into details, it's not only our opinion that the Netherlands is a logistics hub for life sciences, it's shared by many other organizations. The Netherlands is recognized as a model country by the European Union for its transport capabilities and infrastructure. The World Economic Forum and IND, both world-renowned institutions, rank the Dutch air and port infrastructure #1 globally. DHL, which you know is the world's largest 3PL, has recognized our connectedness, measured by cross-border flows of trade, capital, information, and people as the highest in the world. These achievements are a result of being the European gateway for many years, and the Dutch government and the logistics industry work together to keep this position in the future. The Netherlands is centrally located right in between Europe's main healthcare markets, being Germany, France, and the UK. And having a central location is a big benefit. From the Dutch region, 170 million consumers are served within 500-kilometer radius, and approximately 244 million consumers within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Easy access to European overnight transport networks, both air and road, ensure quick and cost-effective delivery into those markets. The Netherlands is home to sophisticated logistics service providers that are specialized in medical devices and pharmaceutical supply chain. But last but not least, we are economically and politically stable. And being centrally located also has its advantages on lead times. Irregular road transport by less than truckload or full truckload is the most economical way to transport goods on a pallet to its European destination. Lead times are 1 day in the Benelux, 1 to 2 days in Germany and France, and 2 to 3 days for the UK. So within about 2 days, most of Europe is covered. For parcel shipments, there's a wide variety of providers that are available. For Express, we have UPS, DHL, FedEx. They all have their main hub within 2 hours from the main Dutch logistics hotspots. UPS in Cologne, DHL in Brussels, and FedEx in Liège. We also have road parcel networks like DPD and GLS, and the national parcel carriers such as Royal Mail, bpost, PostNL Couriers, and La Poste. From the Netherlands, we have daily shuttles traveling to these hubs directly to inject parcels into those national networks to get a high service level for domestic rates. These directing feeds are increasingly used, especially if you have large volumes going through Europe. So now you know that the Netherlands is located in the gravity point of the European consumer market. It's also home to the largest seaport and the third largest airport in Europe. This, combined with the proximity of other major hubs such as UPS, FedEx, and DPD, makes the south of the Netherlands a sweet spot for pharma logistics. The Netherlands is a true logistics hub for pharma and medical devices, and we see this in the import and export figures. It has the 5th highest import and 4th largest export figures in the world at 52.7 and 73.1 billion euros respectively, even despite the fact that our domestic market is 7 times smaller than that of Germany. So that's very impressive. Most medical supplies imported in the Netherlands are destined for other European markets such as UK, Germany, and France, that together represent 55% of the European market. And the Netherlands is right in between. The main reasons are that Europe's main entry point, the Port of Rotterdam and Amsterdam Airport Schiphol, are both located in the Netherlands, and many of the European distribution centers of medtech and pharma companies are located here as well. Now let's dive into our fiscal and business environment. Having a small country and major good flows that are handled every day, it's crucial that imports and exports are dealt with in an efficient manner. To that end, Dutch customs procedures are highly developed and digitized, sometimes allowing customs clearance even before the goods enter the country. To ensure everything keeps running smoothly, the Dutch customs authorities employ dedicated teams of experienced specialists who can assign client managers to individual companies. Many of the logistics companies in the country are authorized economic operators that have direct digital links with Dutch customs, making the customs process even more efficient. As a result, in 2016, the United Nations declared the Dutch customs to be the most trade facilitating in the world, comparing 119 countries around the world. This research looked at various factors influencing trade facilitation, such as transparency, number of formalities, institutional arrangements and cooperation, digitization, and cross-border paperless trade facilitation. The Netherlands really is regarded as a model country for customs around the world. The European Union value-added tax, or EU VAT, is the value-added tax on goods and services within the European Union. We have different tax rates that apply throughout the EU, ranging from 17% in Luxembourg to 27% in Hungary. The Dutch VAT rate is 21% on most goods. But the VAT administration can be quite an administrative burden on businesses, and the way it is dealt with varies widely per EU member state. Deloitte has researched the VAT attractiveness in the EU member states and has concluded that the Netherlands offers the most comprehensive and business-friendly VAT implementation of all EU member states. And the VAT attractiveness analysis has been performed on 14 elements, amongst which are the VAT filing period, complexity of the VAT returns, VAT grouping, payments of VAT refunds, deferment of import VAT, and VAT bad debt relief. One of the important reasons to import your goods via the Netherlands is VAT deferment. And I will explain the process now. Normally, if goods are imported into the European Union, VAT becomes due. This amount can be later reclaimed from the tax authorities. In order to facilitate trade and bring down the administrative burden for companies, the Dutch government made it possible to use the so-called postponed accounting or VAT deferment system. Under this system, VAT does not have to be paid at the moment of importation. Instead, it can be postponed to the periodical VAT return. On this periodical VAT return, the postponed import VAT is declared, but deducted at the same time, which results in considerable cash flow and interest earning benefits for importers. Companies that use the Netherlands as the entry point into the European Union can use the VAT deferment scheme by appointing a fiscal representative. You don't necessarily need to have a local entity. Various partners in the Netherlands can act as your fiscal representatives. The most common are logistic service providers, legal firms, and customs brokers. When the goods are stored in the Netherlands and then shipped to another EU country, which is a so-called cross-border sale, and it concerns a B2B sale, a 0% VAT rate can be applied on the invoice. And invoicing at 0% VAT to your European customers will make you an even more attractive supplier, further enhancing your competitive edge on the EU market. Thanks to our excellent air and seaport infrastructure, the Netherlands has a strong logistics base for pharma logistics. Due to the time limit for today, I will highlight the Pharma Logistics Gateway at Schiphol. Further on in this seminar, Mr. Daniel Bollard from the Port of Rotterdam will highlight the capabilities of the Port of Rotterdam. For Schiphol, IATA has established new guidelines to ensure transparency and proper conditions for pharma air shipments. These protocols are called the Center of Excellence for Independent Validators, also known as CEIV Pharma, which set out specific and clear standards for handling air freight shipments of pharmaceutical goods. CEIV Pharma aims at a worldwide consistency and goes well beyond the transport and storage requirements as mentioned in the Good Distribution Practice guidelines. At Schiphol, we have multiple partners in the supply chain that have achieved the CEIV certification. The Pharma Gateway Amsterdam was founded by Air Cargo Netherlands, Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, and 23 logistics companies. The purpose of the Pharma Gateway Amsterdam is to offer shippers of pharmaceutical products an IATA CEIV Pharma certified closed air freight supply chain. This way, ensuring quality, efficiency, and transparency of pharma shipments. It provides fast customs, real-time access of temperature data at any time, IATA CEIV Pharma certified logistics, and direct air connections to 322 destinations, but also connections via sea, rail, and road transport throughout Europe. Besides our infrastructure, we have many logistics service providers that offer a wider range of services and that are experts at supporting your pharma supply chain. One of these services they offer include bonded warehousing. When a company imports products into the EU, import duties are applied to the product. Contrary to value-added tax, the import duties are an actual cost and rates are the same for all the EU countries. They are paid when the product is imported into the EU. However, it's possible to place goods into the EU territory while they are not yet clear for free circulation. In that case, the product should be placed in a customs bonded warehouse. When goods from a third, non-EU country are placed in a customs bonded warehouse, no customs duties, tariffs, or VAT is due. When it's not yet clear if the goods will be shipped to EU customers or they are destined for regions outside the European Union, it makes sense to put them in a customs warehouse to avoid paying import duties twice. Many third-party logistics service providers in the Netherlands offer bonded warehousing as an option. It's not limited to free trade zones, but can be located anywhere in the country. Products can be stored in a customs bonded warehouse for an unlimited period of time, and value-added logistics are allowed to a certain extent. In pharma and biotech, it's common that third-party logistics companies perform value-added logistics on products after entering the European market. This way, a product can be made market-specific close to the end customer. Activities like labeling, repacking are lower value-add, but higher value-added logistics like testing, sampling, and direct-to-patient distribution are increasingly applied. And our logistics service providers are very innovative and eager to learn. So if there are new value-added logistics that is required for you, they're very willing to learn and to implement new systems for you. Besides the value-added logistics, the Dutch companies also offer value-added services. The third-party logistics companies can support with multilingual customer and back-office service, activities like order intake in local languages, dispatch of invoices, or the order-to-cash management. They can maintain daily contact with clients' customers like hospitals, pharmacies, wholesalers, sales reps, etc. This allows you to focus on R&D, manufacturing, sales and marketing, your core business, while everything in between can be outsourced to specialists that already know the European market. So if you choose for the Netherlands, you benefit from a healthcare ecosystem that is supported by world-class logistics. This combination makes the Netherlands even more attractive, providing many opportunities to you to develop your European business. If you're planning to enter the European market and need logistics advice or introductions to the pharma logistics industry in the Netherlands, feel free to contact us. The Holland International Distribution Council is a private non-profit organization providing matchmaking services for logistics partnerships in Europe. We represent the Dutch logistics sector and help the international companies make a smooth entry in the European market through the region's leading gateway, the Netherlands. We do so by providing advice and helping you find the right logistics partner that suits your needs best, based on our extensive member base, years of experience, and in-depth knowledge of the European logistics industry. And best of all advisory services from HIDC are free of charge, totally confidential, and without any obligation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or need our support, feel free to contact me or place the questions in the chat box for the Q&A session.
Well, thank you, Jasper. The strong logistics backbone will certainly be of value to the Japanese pharmaceutical companies. Well, now, Erik Willems from O&M Movianto will tell you more about the supply chain setup in Europe for pharmaceutical products. Erik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christa, and depending on the location where you are, good morning or good afternoon. My name is Erik Willems, and I'm looking forward to share some thoughts and ideas with you on European supply chain models specific to the pharma industry. So you developed a fantastic new drug or medicine, but how do you now physically get this product to the patient? How do you connect to the point of care in Europe? Let me start with a personal introduction and a couple of words on Movianto on the next slide. As mentioned, my name is Erik Willems, born and raised in the Netherlands, and my education is in supply chain management, both on the materials planning as well as on the physical distribution side. During my working life, I've had the privilege to support many international companies across various different industries on their European supply chain. And one of my key takeaways in that is that supply chain is a true business enabler. It's a bit like magic. It really makes things happen. The flip side of the coin is that supply chain is never in the driver's seat, but is heavily depending on fiscal and regulatory structures. Hence my clear personal interest in these interesting topics. I'm with Movianto, a pan-European based 3PL, and we are 100% dedicated to healthcare. All of our sites across Europe are fully dedicated to pharma and medical device products, completely temperature controlled, and are under a single European quality management system. And together with my 2,500 colleagues, we truly connect you as a manufacturer to the patient. Including warehousing, final mile distribution, value-added services, as well as order to cash. And in fact, as Movianto, we are audited and licensed by the Japanese authorities to distribute pharma products from Europe into the Japanese market. Well, let's go back to you as a healthcare manufacturer. It all starts with a dream, a vision. to develop a human medicine in order to improve quality of life. It might be an orphan drug to treat rare diseases. It might be an over-the-counter product aimed at pain relief, whatever. Patients will benefit from your product. Given its demographics, as well as a very interesting reimbursement scheme, Europe is often seen as an interesting market. It's your dream, your product. And once market access has been granted by the relevant bodies like the EMA, you start manufacturing the product. And rather sooner than later, you will find yourself right in the middle of the following questions. You're experiencing customs delays. How do you actually control and monitor the temperature throughout the entire supply chain, from manufacturing to the patient? How do you interact with your customers in order to grow revenue? And in order to find answers to overcome these questions, we need to take a step back and return to the basics of supply chain. So let's go back to the basics. So supply chain is, like I said, it is the magic to make sure that the right product with the right quantity at the right time is at the right place against the most efficient cost. So far, so good. However, in pharma, we have to add some additional basic rules. As part of the GDP guidelines, securing the temperature throughout the entire chain is a manufacturer's responsibility. In case a patient is impacted by taking drugs that you manufactured and it turns out after thorough investigation that the products have been exposed to extreme heat, for example, while waiting at the tarmac to be loaded onto an aircraft, you might find yourself in a serious business problem with massive consequences. So having said this, how can supply chain bring a positive impact? The fact that companies embrace supply chain is that supply chain can actually impact three key areas. First, it increases your sales. It allows you to trade with Europe and generate revenue. Second, it controls your profit margins. The more efficient you are in your supply chain, the more money you will earn. And three, it drives customer experience. If your customer enjoys your service, they will reorder and reorder and reorder. So summarized, even though it looks like that logistics is costing you money, it actually can help you to differentiate in this dynamic and interesting market. It brings tangible assets to you and your company. In fact, it is a trend in the market that manufacturers see supply chain as a value add, and more companies have a supply chain leader in the board of directors. How does it work? Well, let's go on to the next slide. Let's take a very pragmatic approach here and use a business case example. You manufacture products at your factory in, let's say, Japan. You ship that via rail, air, or ocean to Europe. And as soon as the products approach Europe, several things become a question mark. Where do you ship your products? Do you ship them straight into the main markets like Germany or Italy? Or do you store elsewhere? Who is actually authorized to import pharmaceutical products? Who is the market authorization holder? Do you have one DC for all of Europe or one per country? How do you ensure the temperature monitoring? Do you use a temperature controlled truck or do you use validated shipper boxes? Do you deliver straight to hospitals or pharmacies, or do you have a wholesale or distributor network? Who labels all products compliant to local regulatories? Because we have EU legislation, but we also have local interpretation. And in order to start properly designing your supply chain strategy that really supports your customer needs, there are several key steps to be taken into account. The first one is that you really need to understand the European market. How does reimbursement work in the various different markets? Who eventually pays for your products? Is it the insurance company? Is it the government? Is it a private individual? Can they afford your product? Second, make sure 100% that you have the correct regulatory structure in place. Without this, nothing will fly, and the new market entry is set up for disaster. This is the backbone of everything you would like to accomplish. Unfortunately, we have several speakers later on who will touch base on this as well. As a third step, define a clear sales and marketing plan. Will you partner with distributors or wholesalers, and if so, in which countries? Or will you actually deploy a direct sales force in key markets to better control your own destiny? And once these factors are known and fully understood, only then you can actually design supply chain and see what is the best fit. So summarized, supply chain is a business enabler. Like I said, it's magic. It increases your sales, it controls your profit margins, and it drives customer experience, but you have to do it in the right order. And that is basically summarized on this slide. It's the golden triangle between regulatory, finance, and your go-to-market. Next key decision point is actually, should we have inventory in all countries in Europe, or is there an option to consolidate? And on this slide, what you see is that on one hand, you see the volume going through the entire chain, and on the other hand, you see the product value. And the interesting part is that the high value products actually follow a central supply chain model, whereas the lower value products follow a decentralized supply chain model. And what does this mean? Well, let's have a look. If you look at the overall business case cost of you going into the European market, logistics-wise, then typically transportation and inventory carrying costs are the two main factors. And at the moment that you are manufacturing an expensive, high-value drug, it is likely that you will benefit from putting them into a single or maybe two locations. Consolidate as much as possible. This limits the amount of inventory that you need, and country-specific customization will be done at the DC. Typically in this model, which you actually see on the left-hand side, transportation cost might be a bit higher because from a single DC you need to cover all of Europe. The other option, and that is what you see on the right-hand side, is that if you have a fairly low-value product, but you ship massive pallet shipments or containers to different countries, in that case, transportation cost will weigh in more heavily and could be a substantial part of your total cost. And since this typically includes a more generic product, it is likely that it will be easy for you to replicate inventory across the region. Be closer to your customer, keep transport costs down, and accept a higher inventory cost. So this is the first main decision point where you fit in. Again, generics, medical disposables follow decentral typically. High value medical, high value biotech follow the left-hand side model, which is the central model. With this information in mind, we can move on to the next key point, which is actually your go-to-market plan. This slide looks a bit busy, but let me carefully walk you through. You have several options to sell your products onto the market. And the first bullet point states a distributor or wholesaler. So that means that you as a manufacturer, you appoint a distributor or wholesaler in each of the countries, and you might even work with multiple distributors in one country. You sell to the distributor, and the distributor sells to the domestic market. They actually keep inventory from with your products and supply products directly to hospital, pharmacies, patients. And therefore the distributor is responsible for local regulatory and compliance. And they usually also take on logistics for domestic. For you, that actually means that you have to replenish those distributors from a location which is controlled by you as a manufacturer. And from a supply chain perspective, and that is what you see on the top right, that actually means that replenishing distributors means that you ship pallet shipments, temperature controlled, from your location to the distributor location. The second model that you could apply is a direct sales model, whereby you as a manufacturer sell directly to hospitals and pharmacies. And in fact, this is a trending model. This is what we recognize that more and more manufacturers take out the middleman, take out the distributor, and go direct to the market in the top EU5 destinations. But it also means that you as a manufacturer become responsible for local regulatory and compliance. And again, we have EU legislation, but we have local interpretation. So that can be quite a substantial thing. And that also means that logistics and including order to cash solution is something that you need to take onto your shoulders, meaning that you ship small parcels with products direct into hospitals with a late order cutoff time, because the pharmacy still would like to order at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and have the products available the next morning. And the third alternative is a hybrid model, where you deploy direct sales models in the top EU5 and you appoint distributors in the north or in the south. And like I mentioned, the clear trend here is to have more and more manufacturers going direct. It allows you, like I said, to move on to the next level, which includes direct to patient and home deliveries. A patient tends to recover from their home and not necessarily from a hospital bed. However, that also means that additional challenges, as we need to stay with within the regulatory boundaries set by each country, and temperature control remains a big challenge in the industry for now. So now we have the most important high-level factors that impact the supply chain model. We focused on central versus decentral, and we also have the different sales strategies impacting the supply chain. Where you consequently put those central locations, well, you already heard a lot today that the Netherlands is a great location for that, and that we have the infrastructure to do so. And as Movianto, we can support you perfectly there as well, and we are just one phone call away. So in summary, let's take a look at a real-life business case, which we actually operate for one of our Japanese manufacturers. In this case, the Japanese manufacturer is a high-value specialty pharma and has a hybrid of direct-to-hospital and wholesale go-to-market channels. And therefore, this client, because it isn't a high-value pharmaceutical product, operates from a single DC model. So products are shipped, top corner on the top corner left, are shipped from Japan, typically via air, to our location in the Netherlands. We do all the customs paperwork, the kitting, the labeling, etc. Temp logger management. We release the products into the European market. And from an outbound perspective, we ship pallets into distributors into Spain, Italy, Eastern Europe, etc. And we also ship small parcels using the integrators or using local heroes with active temperature controlled networks to supply products direct to hospitals. So to conclude, as kind of a summary, 4 bullet points here. So first of all, the go-to-market strategy drives everything. Logistics is magic. We make things happen, but we are never in the driving seat. We need to follow regulatory and finance models, as well as the go-to-market strategy. The direct supply chains, where you control your own destiny and you sell direct onto the market, are trending and are used more and more often as a strategic differentiator between you and your own peers. Pharmaceutical supply chains certainly will remain in flux in the coming years. We see that the supply chains are changing, direct to patient is coming there, consolidation is taking place, and so on. And the fourth, patient centricity focus, including all the changing regulatory frameworks, will further drive change throughout the supply chain. And like I said, direct to patient will almost follow e-commerce when it comes to direct to consumer, but then under a fully temperature controlled network is absolutely a totally different specialism. So that kind of concludes my presentation. Many thanks for your time today. Hopefully I've been able to share some thoughts and best practices on European supply chains with you. And as Movianto, we're here to support you to connect you to the patients in Europe. Many thanks for listening in, and all the best.
Well, thank you, Eric, for providing insight into pharma supply chain setups. There are many regulatory factors to take into account as well. Jens Vaassen will highlight some of the regulatory affairs that you need to take into account when setting up your European pharma supply chain. Jens, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you all for joining this seminar on the various topics that we are presenting. For me, it's the job to try and explain or to highlight a little bit the tax and regulatory hurdles, as these are very interesting topics, but in the given time, I can only touch them on a very high level basis. So assuming that some of you are having plans to market your medicinal products manufactured in Japan and to export them to the EU, I will use these 15 minutes to provide you that high-level overview and to touch some of the most important topics that are also mentioned in the previous presentation. So I will start with a small introduction of our firm, just to explain the point of view that I'm giving. So we are a pharmaceutical consultancy company. We work for the healthcare market, covering both medical devices and pharma market, so the pharmaceutical medicinal products. Our background is mostly industrial pharmacists, and we have QPs and RPs in our company. And we are specialized in both manufacturing GMP issues as licensing applications, or even running your marketing applications, your marketing for the product, your regulatory process. So what we do is we support your ambitions to export your products to the EU if you are located outside the European Union. And in that sense, we sometimes even act both as your marketing authorization holder, temporary, or we have a license platform we can use to act as your manufacturer importer. So our solutions are always out of the box, but compliant to all applicable laws and regulations. So in that complex field, and that ever-changing, complex, regulated field, I have picked out a few elements that I would like to highlight in this presentation. So let's start with a common picture of the European Union and the single market that you all want to enter. The single market is defined by 27 nowadays member states. It's still 28 here because it was made before the Brexit, and it's still a little bit gray what this will bring, if whether the UK will definitely leave or not. Well, they have decided to leave, but we'll see at the end of this year how that will work out. But the single market then consists out of 30 sovereign countries, and these sovereign countries are bound together by different legislative instruments. So single market means free movement of people, services, goods, and capital. However, that's from a very high level view. If you zoom in, you will see that national sovereign states still have their interpretations on European laws and how they implement them, and you will run into national differences anywhere you go. So what I want to make clear here is that the single market is an interesting market, the European market is an interesting market, but some of the complexities you should not forget is the fact that we have, for example, the 24 European languages, and together with the other two states, Norway and Iceland, that are the European Economic Area, you have to handle 26 different languages. And why is that important? Because your packs, your medicinal products that you will market on the European market, will have to cover all these 26 languages. Yes, we can go to the next one. So how do you build that single European market? Just a highlighted slide, just to give an idea on how we did it. It was, of course, made by treaties. Some of them are very known, but the most interesting is, of course, the one of the treaty of, how do you say, the first one, the Treaty of Rome, where the founding members were creating a European Union or an idea behind the European Union, and then it took about 56 years, half a century, to get there where we are now. That's just history. Going into the regulatory hurdles, we have to look into the secondary legislation. That means the regulations and the directives that are always implemented into national laws. And in those two instruments are driving whatever we do within this single market. So I will not go into much detail on regulations and directives, but the regulation is more a rule that is applicable to all member states and is one-on-one translated into national law. Directives gives some kind of space for national authorities to give their interpretation, but that's also, in the end of the day, all implemented in the national law. So directives and regulations lead to, and I go to the next slide, to some kind of a more need for explanation on how these regulations should be interpreted. And we have in the pharmaceutical market the Ultralex, which is a book with guidelines, more rules then, and those guidelines help you to understand what needs to be done in order to be compliant with the medicinal or with the directives and regulations up on top of it. So one slide, no, sorry, go back. The Ultralex, simply said, it has 10 volumes. You could make a split between product and process. So on one of the volumes is a very known volume. That's the volume 4 on the GMP, the Good Manufacturing Practice. You could say that describes all the requirements for manufacturing your medicinal products. You have similar GMPs in all over the world, in the US and Japan, in Canada or Australia. So they all call it GMP. And ours is the European GMP. It's in that book. The other side is the volume 1 to 3 and the volume 9 and 10. It more relates to the marketing authorization holder and explains, well, let's say volume 1 explains your pharmaceutical legislation framework, and then it goes on to 2, 3, and 4, where you see guidelines on quality, safety, and efficacy. And the 9 and the 10 are more related to pharmacovigilance, also one of the obligations for your marketing authorization holder. And volume 10 is regarding clinical trials. So you don't have to remember what all is written here. It's the only thing that we want to point out is that it's very complex, very, very large. And you need to understand that those rules are there with a good purpose, meaning trying to harmonize the differences between the sovereign countries and to create a one set of common rules that applies to all. You can go to the next. So, in summary, for this first part, directives and regulations, the instruments that we use to create a single market. Important is that it is, the sole purpose is to, on one side, to safeguard the public health, and the other side is to create non-barriers between the sovereign countries, so to respect the single market principles. This leads to the mother directive I just want to mention, the 2001/83, that goes on all the product authorizations, and then you have the guidelines for good manufacturing practices that relates to the process. So these two are just the ones that I want to highlight further in this presentation. So next slide. What will happen if, and I'm assuming you're coming from Japan, you go to Europe, there are three important elements that need to be taken care of before you even can start having your product in our European market. The first thing you will need is a product marketing authorization. The second you will need is a marketing authorization holder, that's an EU entity. And the third one is that you need an importer, and we call that also a EU manufacturer, because that is the entity that takes on the liabilities for your product within the single market of the EU. So I go to the marketing authorization. just a set of bullet points to indicate where you have to think or what you have to take into consideration. The marketing authorization route consists of 4 different routes. You can have 4 ways to get your product licensed in the European Union, going from national, one country, to a few countries, mutual recognition, to a group of countries, decentralized, but then at one time, or all countries in the European Union through decentralized procedure. Whatever route you will take, you always need a marketing authorization holder and a presence, an EU presence with your with a company, because you cannot apply for a marketing authorization if you are not located within the single market. For each dossier and each application, you have to build your manufacturing supply chain. I call it manufacturing supply chain because then you only look at the whole flow, starting from excipients, starting materials, all the way to the European market release. All the players in there are registered in the dossier, and they are therefore become partners you have to work with. So once they are set, it's more difficult to change that, but that anyone who does regulatory affairs knows that. There are a few European citizens needed. One of them is a QP on your MIA license, but also a QPPV for your pharmacovigilance. And you have to expect that the European authority will come and audit your site. So as you are not located in the single market, you will have a site clearance performed by mostly the authority where that takes the lead on your assessment. For the API, you need to submit a GMP declaration signed by the QP of the European importer. Therefore, he has to conduct an audit of that site, and you have to build up some basics on the pharmacovigilance system. Even if you are not yet on the market, you already need to have that covered. The timeline for each application, marketing authorization, runs up to 1 to 2 years, so it's a long timeline, and any delay at the moment of submission is a waste of time. So you try to prevent that from happening. Focusing into the manufacturing import license, so the manufacturing side, is you need that EU manufacturer to take on your product liability or your product quality function. You need a site or a European entity that will act as an importer, but that importer also takes on the quality responsibility for all the previous steps outside of Europe. So the manufacturing, the packaging, labeling, or serialization steps, all performed by maybe different CMOs, are then put on that MIA responsibility. In order to release the products to the market, you will need a testing lab because you are not an MRA country, or sometimes you're not an MRA country, depending on where you are located. And of course, you need a batch release site and a certification by the QP. Those licenses are always taking more time than expected. So it's not just a form that you fill out and then submit. You have to calculate 6 to 9 months in order to get those licenses, and those licenses need to be in place before you can do the submission of your marketing authorization. So there goes some planning before. The wholesale license is a little bit easier to do and takes less time, and can also be done after you have your granted marketing authorization. So 4 to 6 months is an average time that we take to get those licenses for a wholesaler. So I go to the next. Nowadays we see different worlds colliding together in these supply chain models. So one of them is the one that I am very familiar with, is the GMP supply chain model, very basically written down here, but it shows that in orange are the important players for the regulator, so the marketing authorization holder, who holds the overall responsibility for safety, efficacy, and quality. But for quality and efficacy, it also outsources that responsibility to the importer, the MIA holder, so the manufacturing import authorization holder. They take on the quality assurance responsibility, and they use the QC lab, who has the QC responsibility, so the responsibility to do the testing and to report the analysis, the certificate of analysis, to the MIA. And that three companies together are the ones that are building the bridge for getting your products physically over the border. I draw a red line and a green line because at the moment that the products are actually custom cleared and physically imported, it takes some time before they are QP released and also free for sale into the European Union. What else is interesting to know is that the MIA has the quality oversight, and it means it passes the control of manufacturing to the various CMOs while maintaining the responsibility for the quality and efficacy. That model, that GMP model, goes into a finance model, and this is the only thing I want to say on finance model or fiscal models. They are more complicated, or at least they have a very different point of view. Within this fiscal finance legal framework, we see the approach is that the role of a principal company is much more important, is actually the most important stakeholder, but they are not always the same as the marketing authorization holder or the importer. So if you move the products from an outside or from outside into the EU, you have to map the physical and financial ownership of the product. So this is not about quality responsibility, but about ownership of the products. And in yellow, I have highlighted that typical, let's say, split off of the physical flow from the financial flow. So the products are moved in a different way than the product ownership is moved. And those two models have interact with each other. And if they don't talk to each other, you always get into some kind of roadblocks when you try to move the goods cross-border. So I have used that as a new model in the same way of how do you present such a thing. This model is actually just trying to explain that both are highly regulated markets. One is on the GMP market, one is on the fiscal market. They have their own guidelines and regulations. They have their own, let's say, special persons who take responsibility. So like a qualified person within the Medicines Act or the Udralex equals almost the accountant in the fiscal laws. And we just need to understand how these two models work in order to have a balanced model that works and becomes operational. So finding the optimal balance, that's actually the whole thing I wanted to point out. The key is to find that optimal balance by talking to each other and trying to get that triangle between finance, regulatory, the two driving and controlling forces, explained to supply chain, so supply chain can operate in a compliant manner to get your medicinal products to the patient. So in conclusion, I just wanted to hope that this presentation gave you a little bit of an idea on what you will run into if you are exporting your products from Japan to the European Union. The takeaway message, the minimum takeaway message is, remember, you will always need marketing authorization holder, importer, and a marketing authorization. And these three things are very European, and you will need European persons or entities to fill in these functions. I hope it gave also some awareness that fiscal and regulatory are not different. Well, they are different worlds, but they need to cooperate in order to have a very nice and compliant supply chain. And that is, well, in the end, is to everybody's advantage if you could prevent your import roadblocks before you enter your market. So take care of this and use in-market knowledge in order to make your model the best way possible and to meet our EU market. So thank you for your time, and that was it. I go back to Krista.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jens, for providing an overview of the tax and regulations in Europe regarding the pharmaceutical products. It is a very important topic in order for a Japanese pharmaceutical company to remain compliant on the EU market. There are also regulations when dealing with medical devices. Paul of Freshfields will tell you more about the regulations for medical devices. Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Krista, and thanks everyone for listening in and for having me here today. It is much appreciated. So my name is Paul van den Berg and I'm a partner at Freshfields Broekhuis Deringer, specializing in European law, antitrust and regulated markets, including healthcare. And I divide my time between Brussels and Amsterdam. In the next few minutes, I will give you a high-level introduction to the regulatory framework that applies in relation to medical devices. And I will now start with the presentation. The previous session by Jens related to medicinal products. My session relates to the other key category of products, namely medical devices and in vitro medical devices. The regulatory framework that applies in the Netherlands and Europe is about to fundamentally change, introducing stricter requirements for manufacturers of medical devices. I will sketch the background of the new regime, the direction of travel, some of the key principles that have changed, and highlight the importance of recognizing that certain software and e-health services can qualify as a medical device and therefore trigger the regulatory framework. So on this slide, you see just an example for illustrative purposes, examples of medical devices. These include products, a wide range of products, in fact, such as contact lenses, pacemakers, hip implants, and hearing aids. From a regulatory perspective, medical devices can be divided into 4 different classes, which each result in their own level of legal requirements and responsibilities based on the amount of risk or potential risk for patients these products are assumed to result in. Class 1 is seen as low risk and is characterized largely by self-regulation. Class 2A is medium risk, Class 2B medium to high risk, and Class 3 is considered high risk. Class 2 to 3 require approval and CE marking through a process involving a so-called notified body in Europe, and I will discuss that later in more detail. And the products typically also need to be registered with national authorities, including in the Netherlands. The current European legal framework is regulated through 3 different European directives. In the previous presentation, Jens already gave you some views on the difference between the different legal instruments. And as he mentioned, a European directive is a piece of European legislation that essentially provides guidance and a minimum standard for individual EU member states to implement their own legislation. In the Netherlands, the different European directives have been transposed into national legislation by way of various decrees on medical devices. As I mentioned, medical devices under risk classifications 2 and 3 cannot be sold without approval from the relevant notified bodies. Given the nature of the current European legislation, i.e. in the form of directives, there exist discrepancies between implementation in the various EU member states and between the large number of notified bodies across Europe that approve bringing onto the market these medical devices. In practice, some notified bodies are less strict in their assessment of medical devices than others. This has resulted in certain EU member states questioning the safety of certain medical devices that have been brought upon the market. The breast implant scandal in France of a number of years ago, starting in 2012, as well as incidents in relation to metal hips, have been one of the triggers for reconsidering and significantly strengthening the EU regulatory framework which also affects the rules that you need to observe when bringing such products on the market in the Netherlands. The upcoming EU regulatory framework is summarized on this slide. The 3 existing European directives are replaced by 2 so-called European regulations, one for medical devices and the other one for in vitro diagnostic medical devices. Now, will this result in deregulation? The answer is clearly no. The new European regulatory framework is in fact much more comprehensive. Does it result in more harmonization across the European Union? The answer is yes. European regulations are directly applicable in all EU member states, and the individual EU member states do not need to transpose the European legislation into their own national legislation. Therefore, a greater degree of harmonization and consistency across the European single market will be achieved. Another reason for updating the framework is that the old European framework, which dates from the 1990s, was considered outdated and does not sufficiently take into account scientific progress. The new regulations are updated to reflect the most recent trends and developments, for example, substance-based devices as well as software. Now, if we take a step back and we look at this new framework, we see that traditionally medical devices have been subject to a more relaxed regulatory framework compared to medicinal products. The new European regulatory framework for medical devices narrows that gap somewhat. The new framework was supposed to enter into force last month. However, due to the COVID-19 crisis, the European legislator was afraid of shortages of medical devices as a result of the new legislation. It was therefore decided to postpone application of the medical devices regulation with 1 year until May 2021. And the in vitro diagnostics regulation will in fact enter into effect 1 year later, still in 2022. I will highlight some of the substantive changes under the new framework without pretending to be exhaustive. Under the new medical devices regulation, many devices will need to be notified body involvement for the first time. The impact on patients will form part of a conformity assessment. This means that a manufacturer needs to assess the impact of the medical device on patients and describe that to the relevant notified body before being able to bring this on the market. Many devices will move to a higher risk classification, resulting in more significant regulatory and compliance requirements. Especially high-risk devices will be subject to stricter pre-market control. The number of notified bodies that need to approve medical devices in Europe is expected to significantly decrease, and the oversight of the notified bodies by national authorities, including in the Netherlands, will be strengthened. This is intended to increase the compliance and quality control. A notified body will inter alia assess the manufacturer's quality system, the technical information in relation to the product, production and product quality assurance, and they can conduct audits of manufacturers. The reporting obligation for manufacturers are expanded, for example, in the case of incidents. Manufacturers will also need to appoint a regulatory compliance officer who possesses the requisite expertise in the field of medical devices and will need to actively solicit feedback and request data on the use of their devices from customers. They will need to conduct active post-market surveillance. Another change is that a new device identification system is introduced that will allow easier traceability of medical devices. Manufacturers are subject also to a mechanism that should ensure that patients are financially compensated in case they receive defective products. And Another change which is positive to mention is there's an administrative simplification in the sense that registration of devices will have to be done only once at the EU level. We see the same themes in relation to the in vitro diagnostic medical devices regulation as visible on the right side of the slide. Here again, the scope is materially expanded. It includes, for example, diagnostic services, including internet-based services, genetic testing, etc. There's also a new risk rule-based classification system and many of the conformity assessment requirements, including the use of more rigorous clinical evidence and vigilance and market surveillance requirements, also apply to in vitro devices. The final topic that I would like to briefly highlight to you relates to software. And the key point is that not only traditional medical devices qualify as medical devices under the new regulation, but also software and e-health applications. It is therefore important to realize that software and apps can trigger application of the regulatory framework, as many more companies are making available such tools. If we move on to the next slide, here you see a brief summary of what is e-health and what is such healthcare related software that can fall within the scope. These include a wide range of applications, including mobile apps, digital health records, and other software which is intended to be used in monitoring, treatment, or elevation of disease. Now, the impact is that if software or mobile applications or other forms of e-health qualify as medical devices, they are subject to the rules in the new framework. This means, inter alia, that CE marking is required before you are able to offer the software or digital product. A conformity assessment is required, registration is required, as well as market vigilance and surveillance. On the right side of the screen, you can see some rule of thumb indications which can help you to determine whether a piece of software or e-health service may fall within the scope of the medical devices regulation or not. In the interest of time, I will finalize. I hope you have found this brief tour de horizon helpful. The key things to remember is that the scope of regulated medical devices and in vitro medical devices has expanded significantly, that there is more harmonization across the EU, that the compliance and reporting requirements have increased, that requirements for certification are more extensive, and that software is a key component of the new framework. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Paul, for providing an overview of the regulations regarding medical devices and explaining about the rules for e-health, a very interesting topic. Then, when you export your goods to Europe, chances are high that they enter Europe through the port of Rotterdam, the largest port of Europe. Mr. Daniel Bollard will explain the supply chain approach of the Port of Rotterdam for pharmaceutical products. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you for your introduction and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see that you're still here at the end of the presentation of the seminar, of the last presentation. My name is Daniel Bollard. I'm a business manager of the Shippers and Forwarders team at the Port of Rotterdam Authority. And within the next 15 minutes, 9 slides, I would like to enlighten the role of the Port of Rotterdam and especially the role we can play as a part of the pharmaceutical reefer container supply chain. In the next slide, I would like to start with an overview of some facts and figures related to the container segment of the Port of Rotterdam in 2019. At this moment, the Port of Rotterdam is the biggest container port in Europe and the number 10 largest container port in the world. However, this already sounds very interesting. I always like to enlighten the underlying reasons for that, and especially the reason which is all about the connectivity, which really explains this position and which allows us to have this position. So not only the Port of Rotterdam is the largest port in Europe, it's also the market leader in dry bulk, liquid bulk and container handling. And from this facts and figures overview, I would like to enlighten a few numbers. If you look at the left side of this slide, it's about deep sea calls. Now per week the port receives 48 deep sea calls, and from these 48 liner services, 21 have a first port of call in Rotterdam and 11 have a last port of call. Especially liner services originating from Asia arrive in Rotterdam as a first port of call next to South Africa, South America. And in terms of total container lead times, this really influences your container supply chain positively. Next to deep sea calls, I would like to focus on the container type distribution. As a port, we are more and more focusing on the underlying container type segments. In the middle of the slide, you will see the container type distribution. We have tank containers, dry containers, but especially in reefer containers, we see an increase in the volume that is handled via our port. Now, on the one side, an explanation for that is the agri-food segment. Agri-food is highly increasing year on year. But we also see an increase in pharmaceutical reefer containers that are being handled, being imported and exported in our port. Especially the last year, we saw a growth of nearly 10% of pharma reefer containers alone. Partly due to the containerization of goods, but we also see a strong shift from air to ocean as a reason for this pharmaceutical container increase. These are several reasons for us as a port authority, to focus on this specific segment. Now, with regards to the geographical location of the ports, it's already mentioned several times. We are located at the mouth of the Rhine River, which leads to a high connectivity via the hinterland inland waterways. Now, if you combine this with the extensive rail, short sea and road connections, the Port of Rotterdam can act as your gateway to and from Europe for your segment. This results in the reach of 500 million consumers within 24 hours of inland transportation. And together with Mainport Schiphol and other supply chain partners, this makes us in the Netherlands ready for the future. Now, throughout the port cluster, we offer state-of-the-art warehousing opportunities, which offer an ideal position close to the deep sea terminals and hinterland modalities. And a variety of warehousing and distribution possibilities are visible on this slide. What I would like to enlighten is that more and more warehouses in the port itself, and for example in the east of the Netherlands, are GDP compliant, which means that the pharmaceutical goods can be handled perfectly with the highest quality and reliability focus. Now, why would you choose for Rotterdam? The port can act as a gateway, which was already mentioned in the earlier presentations. It can act as a gateway to and from Europe due to its geographical position, the deep sea and inland connections, and the state-of-the-art terminals, and last but not least, the professional supply chain partners all along the port infrastructure. Now, this means that we can offer a reliable service with a fast and efficient handling of goods. Next to quality and reliability, there's always a strong focus on safety and sustainability projects, but also as a port authority, we make sure the safety and sustainability are always there. And it's notable throughout the port cluster and infrastructure, which all leads to this smooth end-to-end flow the Port of Rotterdam has to offer. Now, the Port of Rotterdam Authority, where we work for as a shippers and forwarders team, manages, operates and develops the port and industrial area of Rotterdam, and we are responsible for maintaining a safe and smooth handling of all shipping. Now, being a port authority means that we are not a direct part of the supply chain. We do not handle or own the container, the reefer container, at any part of the container chain. But we can use our position, which is a neutral position, towards the supply chain. It can help us bringing parties together in adding value by playing the matchmaking role and building the data positions with all supply chain partners in and around the port. And we do this by initiating innovating new projects, for example, by focusing on digital supply chain solutions with and for shippers and forwarders. and also by investing. By investing, we make sure that the port's infrastructure, including the waterways, is up to the highest standards at any time. Now, we are aware that not all pharmaceutical products are being transported via a reefer container. Via our data providers, we can see that more than 2/3 of all pharma that is handled in Rotterdam is transported via a reefer container. In Europe, the port of Rotterdam is the most important port for importing and exporting cargo in reefer containers. This is because we offer all the needed facilities together with the supply chain partners such as terminals, warehousing operators, inland operators, and the port is well equipped to handle all types of conditioned cargo, but especially excels in the handling and operating the services needed for the transport by refrigerated containers. We have one of the highest amount of reefer plugs in the world, with an addition flexible add-on at the deep sea terminals in terms of additional reefer plugs. More important, and already mentioned earlier, a strong focus on GDP compliancy is noticeable throughout the port, with for reefers a temperature control monitoring in all positions in the port's infrastructure. Now, as a port, we believe that creating and maintaining a very high quality and reliable port for handling reefer pharma containers cannot be done without cooperation with all supply chain partners. In the end, a well-functioning container port can only provide the highest quality and reliability when every supply chain actor is looking at the same direction. Therefore, we invest a lot of time and resources to set up cooperation with carriers, with terminals, with forwarders, with operators, and in the end also the port community system, port base, and customs, to make sure we are constantly fulfilling the needs of the shippers that in the end use our port. Also with shippers themselves, we have set up close relations in order to further strengthening the pharmaceutical reefer container flow through Rotterdam. To give you an example, with 7 out of 15 worldwide biggest shippers in terms of volume, we have a cooperation in place where we exchange data, we exchange insights, best practices, and we are constantly looking to expand these cooperations. Now, within the pharma reefer community that we have set up recently, we regularly receive questions about the Dutch customs. And the Dutch customs is a topic that has already been explained or touched on in this presentation. Especially in Rotterdam, they can help facilitate a smooth supply chain instead of delaying it. The answer is shown on the slide. So the question is, how can the customs help my supply chain? We have the advantage that the Dutch customs are operating 24/7 with the most efficient and technological scanners, and the scanners are situated at the deep sea terminals themselves. This leads to a very efficient, high-speed, reliable process because there are no unnecessary transport moves in place. This saves time and in the end saves costs. Now, this slide enlightens again that the customs have efficiency as a KPI, with what we see is a very pro-business attitude and a fully digital handling of the documents that are needed for your containers transport. And all concepts are set up in place, like single window or one-stop shop, to make your container handling via the Port of Rotterdam as high as quality and reliability sense made. And last but not least, this is a brief overview. The next slide is a brief overview of several digital initiatives we have in place. Next slide, please. Because as a port authority, digitization and sustainability are two topics that are found in all projects and focus segments. Also in the reefer container segments, we focus on data exchange to inform the port users as much as possible with the right transport variables together with the right supply chain partners. Now, I have summed up some initiatives we have which are based on the ocean, port and hinterland side, which are all helping shippers and forwarders and port users, port actors, in order to handle the container as smooth as possible. Now, 10 to 15 minutes is too short to enlighten all of the digital initiatives, so I would really like to encourage you to contact us. Contact us if you want more information about the Port of Rotterdam. If you want more information about our pharma supply chain initiatives we have set in place with shippers, for shippers, with supply chain actors, or if you want more contact with reliable supply chain partners we have in the port, not only in the port but also in the ecosystem next to Rotterdam. My contact details can be found on this slide, and if you want more information about other projects you can find us on portofrotterdam.com. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Daniel, in providing an insight into the capabilities and competences within the Port of Rotterdam. Well, now it's time for the Q&A, and we already received some questions. The first question, and I think it's meant for Eric, what type of temperature control is most common in the EU for transport and distribution, active temperature or passive temperature control? And does this depend on product type value? Eric.
Yeah, sure. Many thanks and good question. So first of all, no. So temperature control does not depend on product value. It is actually, if your product is a human medicine, it is actually bound by regulatory under GDP to be fully temperature controlled throughout the entire supply chain. The most common ranges that you see is, there are a couple, is 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. It's 2 to 8, so that's chilled. And you have multiple ranges when it comes to frozen temperatures. What kind of solution is applicable? Because indeed you have validated shippers, but you also have an active temperature controlled network. Depends a little bit on whether you ship a pallet or whether you ship parcels. To start with the first one, a pallet shipment, typically within Europe, that is to, for example, replenish a wholesaler, typically is done by road using an active temp controlled LTL network. At the minute that you need to fly, then either active or passive pallet shippers are available. Think about SkyCell, Envirotainer, SeaSafe, these kind of solutions. That's for pallets. For parcels, a lot of manufacturers still depend on the validated shipper box. Remember, typically you ship a parcel if you are in a single DC solution, meaning that you have a high value biotech product, for example. And then from that single DC, you need to leverage the integrators in order to reach your patients overnight. So in that case, you do need a validated shipper box to maintain the temperature at 15 to 25, 2 to 8, or even frozen. However, as a trend, you see more and more local domestic networks being established to deliver parcels in an active temperature controlled network. And I guess as a next step in the evolution of those networks is that that those domestic networks will be hooked up together to create a pan-European active temperature controlled parcel network for final mile delivery. But that's future music. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, well, thank you. We go to the next question. Could you please explain direct to patient model and how its logistics is organized? What type of products are currently delivered direct to the patient? Who can answer that question? Eric.
Yeah, let me indeed try to answer that. For one pragmatic example here is dialysis. So renal dialysis. A lot of patients are actually at their house. Instead of them going to the hospital several times a week, the dialysis will actually happen at their houses, at their home. So that is a pragmatic example. In order to, logistics-wise, the direct-to-patient supply chain or logistics is typically done at a very local level. So in the Netherlands, for example, there are specialized temperature-controlled networks that can deliver to a patient's door or even into their houses, but that is not available on a pan-European scale. So it's domestic, it is very specialized, but it has to happen under the GDP guidelines, where temperature control is a key thing.
Well, thank you, Eric. Then a very broad question. What long-term impact could the COVID-19 pandemic have on pharma supply chains to EU, the Netherlands? Who would like to answer that question?
Jasper Eggebeen will answer that question. Please turn on your microphone, Jasper.
Yes, thanks, Stan. I'm not going to pretend that I have a crystal ball, because I think this is the main question that is on everyone's mind. But there are a few things that we can derive from what we have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen that regions have closed down. We have seen that factories have closed, and that resulted in shortages of medical supplies, and also supplies to the hospitals, to the nurses, to the doctors, for them to do their job. So I think in the future there will be a focus on the supply chain towards continuity, and that's what I expect will mean on the short term that we will see some more buffering of stock, to have enough stock at hand in cases of emergencies. We need to have medical staff protected to continue to do their job. We need to have plenty of supplies to treat the patients. And this buffering of stock may also be on a national level, because governments all have their own responsibility to protect and to uphold their healthcare system. On the long term, who knows? If you look at the supply chain, I think we have to focus on the whole supply chain, from raw material all the way to the final medicine and to the administration of the patient. So what we see now is that there's the raw materials that are developed into active ingredients are being done all around the world, and an active ingredient actually travels around the world many times before it ends up in a medicine. So that is a supply chain that is very vulnerable for a COVID-19. So when a region shuts down and you cannot access those laboratories developing an active ingredient, you will not be able to develop a medicine. So we might see decentralized production of pharmaceuticals and medical devices in the different regions around the world, where the production capabilities will become more autonomous. So you do not depend on other regions or other laboratories beyond your control to develop a product or to produce a medical device, such as a mask, for example, or test equipment to test patients. If this happens, and there are many scenarios that can unfold, but when we start to produce in a more decentralized, autonomous level, regions like the Netherlands will perhaps have a higher export function compared to the pre-COVID-19 time period. But for now, I think we need to monitor the way we grow out of the COVID-19. We need to take and learn our lessons from this experience and make sure that the supply chain becomes more stronger and can better withstand these kind of situations. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, thank you, Jasper. Well, these were the questions in the chat box. Please be assured that we will send all the slides from the presentations to all participants of this webinar. And well, I think the next step will be the closing remarks of Mr. Gerard Michels. Well, as I already explained, there were technical problems, and so it's not possible for Mr. Michels to have the closing remarks for you directly. So he asked me to read those closing remarks from him to you. So here I go. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gerard Michels, and I'm the Dutch Consul General in West Japan. I'm happy to have been invited to say a few words to you today. The Consulate General is based in Osaka, where Western medicine was first taught in Japan by Dr. Okata in 1838 at the Teikiyuku. This school grew into the modern medical faculty of Osaka University. But well before that, Osaka Doshimachi area established itself as Japan's center of traditional medicine, both for trade and production. No wonder then that Osaka was the birthplace of such major pharmaceutical companies as Astellas, Ono, Roto, Takeda, Sumitomo Dainippon, and Mitsubishi Tanabe, just to name a few. There are many more. Now, of course, some companies have their headquarters in Tokyo. Some are still based in Kansai, but not just Japanese pharma companies are active here. The regional medical research network in Osaka, Kyoto and Kobe, has also attracted such foreign companies as Bayer and AstraZeneca. Ladies and gentlemen, the corona pandemic has shown how important global connections are to addressing today's public health challenges, both commercially and in research. Japan's pharma companies are today in forefront of the fight against COVID-19, developing drugs and vaccines. Japan's pharma is world-class, but a stagnant home market, government price controls, and the rise of generic medicines show that growth lies abroad through acquisitions, partnerships, and exports to the other major markets of the world, Asia, the US, and not least, Europe. Today's seminar has highlighted the opportunities that the Netherlands has to offer for partnerships and as a reliable base for and gateway to expansion in European markets. To conclude, I want to thank DUJAT and Holland International Distribution Council for organizing this webinar, the speakers for their contributions, and all of you for your interest and participation. I hope for your continuing health and welfare and look forward to easier times ahead. Thank you very much. That's what Mr. Michels would like to tell you. Thank you very much. And I give the floor back to Stan now.
Nee, doe maar de slide. Thank you, Krista, and thank you for moderating today's event. Very much appreciated. Many thanks to Consul General, Mr. Michels. We've tried to get it technically to work, but I think this was a great solution. Thank you everyone for joining for today. We will end the live event soon. As you've registered for this event, you will also receive the slide deck, so all the presentations, and we have recorded the webinar. And through our website, hidc.nl, you will be able to see the recording probably later today, latest tomorrow. And if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to HIDC. Thank you again, have a great day, and hope to speak to you later. Thank you.